Welcome to the Female CEO Club, a podcast featuring interviews with inspirational entrepreneurial women. From starting up a business from scratch to being asked to take the wheel, these incredible women share the story of their journey, the highs and the lows, and the advice they'd like to give to those embarking on their own voyage. Hosted by me, Liz Bhandari, a passionate marketer living in Greater Manchester, the Female CEO Club aims to inspire fellow females who are looking to set up on their own, who have already set sail, or who simply love to hear stories from women who've been there, done it, and got the t-shirt. Today's episode tackles the subject of gender balance at the top and how it is still one-sided. Now, I was reading an article published back in October, which was headlined "Only 8 of the UK's top 100 companies are headed by women." The story went on to say how, among the UK top 100 listed companies, 31 women held executive roles in 27 companies, 8 were chief executives, and 15 were chief financial officers or finance directors. And after several initiatives to balance blue chip company boardrooms, the number of female FTSE 100 CEOs remained in single digits. However, I am joined by a special guest today, who is the founder of 25 by 25, who has a plan to remedy this. Now, this is a directional target of 25 women CEOs in the FTSE 100 by 2025 and 25% of the FTSE thereafter. And here she is now to tell us all about it. Welcome to the show, Tara. How are you?
Very well indeed, thank you.
Brilliant. Well, I'm still blown away by the fact that only 8 of the UK's top 100 companies are headed by a woman. Why is there such a gender imbalance?
So the first good news is that we've got one more woman in, so we're now 9 as opposed to 8. So that was a very nice announcement that came out a couple of weeks ago, and it was a very surprising and nice announcement because it was in the property and construction sector, which traditionally hasn't been a sector that has had a lot of women. So it just goes to show that some women and some companies are working particularly hard to find the opportunities for the women so they can get through to the top position, which is the CEO position. Yeah. So that's the good news. In relation to your question, it's a hard question to answer. And it's the question that we set out to answer when we first got together nearly 2 years ago now, to answer and attempt to resolve this very low number of women in the FTSE 100 companies and generally in UK business.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that, obviously there are some sectors that are better than others. Which would you say is probably the most, innovative in that kind of way, that has more, that seems to, make the right moves, if that makes sense?
So in terms of the analysis that we undertook before we started surveying the FTSE 100 companies initially, we did look at the data sectorially. So 25 by 25 is a very data-driven organization, and any analysis that we do is fundamented on underlying data. And one of the findings that we had was that there was no correlation between women coming through to the senior positions. So that's the top 3 levels of leadership. So that would be obviously the CEO level, the level below that, the executive committee, the level below that, the executive committee -1 or direct report, and the level below that. And we didn't find any correlation with the number of women generally in the workforce within that company and those women coming through. So in that way, it proved the point that women don't just bubble through to the top, which was a comment that we'd got from a couple of people. There had to be the right framework in place for women to succeed. So the second piece of analysis that we undertook was looking at the situations where women were coming through to the top. So we looked at it the other way around, rather than looking at it from the volume of numbers, looking at it from the success stories, as it were. And in that, we found that where there was a will, there was a way. So where the leadership team had made a concerted effort to make sure that women were given the right opportunities at the right time, we saw some fabulous talent coming through. And likewise, in companies where that framework didn't exist or there wasn't enough support around the women in these senior positions, then women started falling away when they reached the upper echelons.
Wow. So talk to me a little bit more around your initiative. So 25 by 25, how did that come around? And what's the plan for the future?
So 25 by 25 came around because a group of women sat round a dinner table in November 2019, and these were senior women, CEOs, chairs, a good representation of corporate, government, regulators, and we all sat round a table and asked the question that you asked at the beginning: why are there so few women CEOs? And obviously it was a group of 20 people or maybe 22 people, and there were various views, but we all came to a consensus that there were some basic elements that had to be studied and analysed in order to reach any sort of viable answer. And these elements were succession planning. That was a key area that we had to ask about. The talent pipeline, how did it look? How did it work? With a specific focus on the pathways to CEO, because women are getting through to senior positions. But if you are in a purely functional role, i.e. a role where you've never had direct responsibility for profit and loss or for an operational center or a department, which we term direct profit center experience, DPCE, then it's more unlikely that you will be a good candidate to be a CEO. The other elements that we also thought were important were accountability. So that's the role of the board and the nominations committee, which we refer to as NOMCO, and the support measures around that. And once we had explored those 4 areas, then the next question was, should this be a government-led initiative, which have been the initiatives that have gone before, and they've been excellent. So we've got the Davis Review, which first started tackling women on boards, which then became Hampton-Alexander, which broadened that work out to women at the executive committee, which then led on to FTSE Women Leaders, as it's called now. But the conclusion that we came to in discussion with the various chairs was that when it came to the CEO, it was a singular position. So it's a different equation. One thing is to ask a company to select 3 out of 4 out of a body, or 10 or 12. And it's quite another thing for a singular position. So we actually felt that we had to address the whole framework, which was succession planning, talent pipeline, accountability, the role of the NAMCO, targets. And so we asked companies, we did a survey with the FTSE 100, and we spoke to 85 out of 100 of the FTSE 100 chairs, who are all very eager to engage in the dialogue. And this took place predominantly between March and May of 2020. And we asked them the question, how do you think this should be approached? And the answer was, well, it should be corporate-led. And we said, well, if it is going to be corporate-led, you'll have to sign up to the framework. You have to deliver on the framework. You will have to fund the support structure that we create to help you adopt this framework. And it will be data-driven. So we wish to develop some data tools so that not only the companies, but the market can measure people's effectiveness. And this will have to be supported by you. And luckily, the answer was yes, we're keen to engage, and hence 25 by 25 was incorporated.
That's brilliant. I love that story. And I love that you guys are data driven as well, because there's so much power in that. Has there been any data that came through that actually like really surprised you, or maybe even like shocked you a little?
So we haven't released any data yet. So we have been analyzing this, and we've accumulated quite a body of data, and we've developed some interesting tools, prediction tools, because obviously we've been looking at this very closely for the last 2 years. So yes, data is very important, but also data can be very dangerous. So we're very conscious about being responsible about data and how this is shown. So obviously there's certain metrics that are out there, 9 CEOs out of 100 is a metric. That's something that is unavoidable. But the undertaking that we have with companies is to work with them. So we don't want to criticize, we want to encourage, and we recognize that different companies are at different stages of evolution. Some companies have done a lot of work, so it's easy for them to set public targets because they can feel confident that they will achieve them. Other companies are really at the beginning, and it's very important that we get the whole over this hump, not just a few select companies who are doing it very well, because otherwise we just repeat the pattern. We'll just get another few women CEOs coming through. So the first tool we're working on is actually a private benchmarking tool for members. So the companies have signed up. As it denotes, it's private. It will be for the members, but it will allow them to analyze their data in detail, to benchmark their data, and to therefore point out the areas where they can improve on, and also embolden them to have more transparency around the numbers when they feel equipped to do so.
And I think that's it, exactly what you said about like the data. It can be dangerous, and actually at the end of the day, you're not here to bash, you are here to like empower these companies to make the right change. And I think sometimes that's the unfortunate kind of perception that women-driven exercises seem to have, in the sense of some people sit there and think, oh, it's women on their pedestal again, and it's absolutely not that at all, is it?
So we don't see this as a DE&I initiative at all. We think DE&I is extremely important. We think that it's very important to have that lens. We have that own lens within 25 by 25 to make sure that we capture it. But for me, DE&I is essentially about prejudice in the workforce. And so it's along a continuum with, mental health issues. It's a more general measure. In terms of what we're tackling, it really is pure and straightforward talent management. Women are 50% of the population, 50% of the graduates of the best universities, mostly 50% in the graduate schemes of the larger companies. So if they're not getting through to the top position, then there's something structural about the companies that's prohibiting that move.
Yeah, absolutely. Where would you like to take kind of 25 by 25 next? Like what goals do you have for that?
So like all these processes, it starts off with a lot of excitement, and we've got some wonderful supporters, and we've got some amazing founding members. So we started with Unilever, BP, NatWest, Morgan Stanley, BA Systems, Deloitte, a whole raft of very big companies who are very committed to that. So they are the people that genuinely inspire us because they are so committed to this cause. But as we said, when we started out, we always wanted to make sure that we brought everyone through. And like all these initiatives, normally the companies that feel very confident about these matters are the ones that first sign up. But for us, I think the next step is to make sure that we get some companies who are only just embarking on this journey, who hear the message, like the message, and want to embark on that message. So we'll be very happy when we've onboarded companies who go, well, we're starting at zero, because it really is for everyone. I think we'll feel very